Welcome to another video from IQ Wealth Calculators. This video series is made to help you learn financial concepts and how they are calculated. Today we're going to talk about the yield to maturity. The yield to maturity is a concept whereby the rate of return is calculated on a bond as if that bond is held to maturity. Maturity is a word that just means it is a point in time at which the principal amount that was lent to the borrower is paid back in full. The reason people calculate the yield to maturity and not the yield at some other point in time is because A, most people will hold the bond until its maturity date, and B, the ending price of a bond is known at maturity and would be difficult to predict during the life of the bond. This ending price is important when it comes to calculating the yield, and because interest rates fluctuate, the price of the bond will also fluctuate, making the yield calculation at any point in time an estimate at best. For those that don't know, here's a quick definition of a bond. A bond is an investment where an investor lends money or principal to a company or other entity in exchange for interest payments and a return of their investment/principal at maturity. This is a very general definition, and there are different types of bonds that have varying characteristics, but this definition gives you the general idea. When determining the yield to maturity of a bond, there are four key pieces of information a person needs to know. First, what is the price that is paid to purchase the bond? Here it's the market value. Second, what is the par value of the bond, or in other words, what is the price that the bond will be when the bond matures? That's here. And just to emphasize, when a bond matures, it is a word that means the borrower pays principal back to the lender. By knowing this, it helps us know how much money the borrower will pay to the lender at its maturity date. Third, we need to know how many years or the amount of time there are until maturity. That's here. And fourth, we need to know the annual coupon rate, which will determine the coupons or interest payments that will be paid annually to the lender until the bond matures. Let's look at an example. Let's say an investor is going to buy a bond for $1,000. They're going to hold that bond until maturity, which is in 5 years. While they hold that bond for 5 years, they're going to be receiving an annual coupon or interest rate of 5%. And when the bond matures, they're going to receive their full payment back of $1,000. So the amount of money they receive at maturity is going to be the same amount of money that they paid for the bond. In this scenario, it makes for a very simple calculation, and the yield to maturity essentially equals your annual coupon rate of 5%. Let's look at a more complicated example. In this example, let's say the bond investor is going to purchase the bond for $900. Again, they're going to hold the bond until maturity, which is 5 years away. During those 5 years, they're going to receive an annual coupon rate of 5%. And at the end of the bond at maturity, they're going to receive back their principal, which will be $1,000. So you'll notice that they bought the bond in this scenario for $900. And at the end, at maturity, they're going to receive $1,000, which gives them an extra source of a return on their money. Whereas before, they were going to get the same amount of money back that they paid for the bond. So during those 5 years, the market value of the bond is going to fluctuate, and for purposes of this illustration, we run a straight line amortization schedule where each year the bond is going to grow by $20 until in year 5, the value of the bond equals the same as the par value. And in this scenario, that extra source of return increases your rate of return from 5% in the last example to 7.47% in this example. Now let's talk about a couple other items of note about the yield to maturity and this yield to maturity calculator. You'll notice that this calculator calculates a yield each year all the way up to the year it matures. That can be found in this column. The way it does this is assumes a straight line value between the market value and the par value in this column. The bond value will never move that way in the real world, but we must make assumptions in order to calculate a yield each year. And if you want to see the yield calculated each year visually, be sure to click on this chart right here. And that brings this video to an end. We at IQ Wealth Calculators hope you find this video useful for your learning. We would love it if you'd be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more helpful tips like this one.